Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Thank you very much. Let me first respond to Dr. Harris and clarify one thing on school discipline. The issue is the differing of punishment by race for the same type of infraction. The disparity there as it relates to suspensions and expulsions. For the same fraction, black and brown students are disciplined and expelled at a much higher rate. That's what you call racial bias and racism. Madam Secretary, let me ask you, because I'm not so sure you really are clear about racial bias and what this all means. First of all, you're officially seeking to delay by 2 years an Obama rule aimed at combating disproportionate numbers of minority students in special ed classes. That's according to the Federal Register notice published on Tuesday. Secondly, you said you wanted all students, including students of color, to learn in safe environments. We all want that. Yet students of color are subjected to harsher punishments and disciplines. Should the president's view prevail in arming teachers, do you see why black and brown students are really worried and anxious about this? Very clear to me. And also, let me just ask you, as it relates to your comments, as it relates to considering the elimination of the discipline guidance. Actually, this is a report in the wake of the tragic shootings in Florida. The White House releases reports, school safety proposals, which imply really that black and brown students are responsible for mass shootings in schools, which is just not the case. This directive was really to ensure that students of color are not subject to the harsher disciplines and so now and practices. And now you're talking about possibly eliminating this based on the tragedy of gun violence in Florida. So can you comment on that, please? And if that's really what you're thinking about doing?
Thank you, Congresswoman. That particular piece of guidance has been under review per the executive order to review all regulation within the department. And this is a matter we take very seriously. Clearly, the stated goal of the guidance is one that we all embrace to ensure that no child is discriminated against. And we are committed to reviewing and considering this guidance and taking appropriate steps if any are warranted. But I have nothing further to say at this point with regard to where that is.
Well, how about, let's go to the delay of the regulation requiring a strategy to combat disproportionate numbers of minority students in special ed classes. Why the 2-year delay on that?
The delay is to ensure that we have a regulation that really does meet the needs of students that are disabled in any way.
By 2 years, though? Why would you do that?
We are committed to upholding the provisions of IDEA, and I want to be very clear that addressing this issue appropriately. There have been varying opinions and very different approaches to this within the community that are most concerned about this. We want to ensure that we end up with a regulation that does address these issues appropriately.
Another example of the fact that I think that more and more every day that your head is in the sand about racial bias and racial discrimination. I wrote you a letter June 2017 concerned about school segregation and what this means in terms of addressing the adverse effects of segregation on minority students to ensure that every student has an opportunity for an equal education. You never answered that letter nor that question. I'd like for you to please respond to that.
I'm sorry if we have not yet responded to it. We are still waiting to actually have Senate-confirmed nominees become a part of the department, and would urge that this body encourage your fellow members of Congress.
Madam Secretary, you just don't care much about civil rights of black and brown children. This is horrible.
It is Wednesday, the 21st of March of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That's right. Do not put the avocado on the Benedict, please. It's no longer a Benedict. And come on, put it on the side where it belongs. I love avocado. I'm not biased against avocado. In fact, I'm biased for avocado. And I don't know why they think avocado toast is such a new item. I mean, we used to have avocado, alfalfa sprouts, a little bit of sea salt and cracked pepper on bread, sometimes toast, crackers. I personally like mine on toasted sourdough bread. And who wouldn't? Okay. I mean, I could go on and on about what makes a Benedict and what is the best avocado in the world. And I got to tell you, it's not the Haas. Okay. I will admit, the Haas has a pretty damn good package. But there's some better avocados out there, and there's a whole story about that. Well, they have tracked down the Austin bomber, engaged him in a firefight, and the fellow blew himself up in his van. I'm relieved. I got to tell you, I was getting pretty scared there, but I'm relieved to find out that the Austin bomber is not a terrorist. Whew. I was getting pretty scared there. Oh yeah, well, he was a white guy, and by default, white guys are not terrorists. So it was just, he may have been troubled, obviously troubled, and, but good work. I got to tell you, sometimes the surveillance state reaps some good, and they'll tout this as an example of why, every move we make, they got to watch, because you never know when something bad might happen. And as I always mentioned, whenever security cameras are put into any business that I owned or worked at, that it will never stop the crime. But at least we'll be able to find the person that murdered the clerk at the front desk later. And they usually do later. Okay, well, I hope that this terror that was perpetrated upon Austin all these many weeks, I hope that's over now, because you never know about copycats. And yeah, there's going to be some coming out of the woodwork, to be sure. Okay. Oh, and just as a reminder, David mentioned it too, we do have bomb control. Okay, you can't go into Walmart and buy a bomb. Just telling you. What do we have on the rest of the menu today in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, Barbara Lee speaks for me. I miss Barbara Lee. She's my former congressperson, and, we used to go to speeches and whatnot, even lunch at various places around town, both Berkeley and Oakland. And Barbara would be there and, give a little talk, and it was wonderful. I miss her. She speaks for me. And she took Betsy DeVos to the woodshed. It was pretty much shut down by the Republican who was running the committee. But at the end, you didn't hear that. But he was he was a little terse, shall we say. But nevertheless, she persisted. And Betsy DeVos should, go back to doing the pyramid scheme that she married into. And maybe they might be able to keep their brother out of the brig. I don't know where he's going. I don't know. Is there an extradition treaty wherever Eric Prince's domicile is currently? Because he left America. That's how much he loves it. A little bit harder to take over the United States than he anticipated, but they're still trying. Well, on the rest of the menu and the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, speaking of mercenaries, a private mercenary firm is making millions off the tragedies in Houston, Puerto Rico, and Standing Rock. Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg has sold more Facebook stock in the last 3 months than any insider at any other company in the same time period. Now, of course, usually they're put on a schedule and it's hands off. Well, they could stop. They can stop the sell and buy. But just interesting that in the last 3 months, better pull some of that stock out. Now he says he's going to do it for philanthropy. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. And in a bid to directly compete against Russia, Chinese surveillance and tech giant Alibaba has joined the American Legislative Exchange Council, affectionately known as ALEC, and will start co-authoring U.S. legislation. That's how much they love America. Yes, indeed. Ooh. And after the break, we'll then move to the chef's table, where a Republican lawmaker in Pennsylvania is trying to impeach 5 Supreme Court justices who voted that the state's gerrymandered congressional map was unconstitutional. Okay. Well, attack every other institution here in the great old United States. The judiciary's got a target on his back from the very beginning. And the CIA argued that torture sessions at its black sites were actually business meetings so they could destroy the videotapes. Like I've always said, it's not personal. It's business. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right-ish is the chat room link. Kelly Lincoln, our rowing girl, monitors that. And if you look to the left-ish of the chat room link there at the bottom of the homepage, you'll notice the Contribute Donate buttons. And we are unable to do this without you, so thank you for your generosity. You can follow us on Twitter at Netroots Radio. And also on Facebook, though, I don't know, maybe people ought to get rid of their Facebook. All right? Knowing what we know. But certainly maybe turn off the app sharing. There's a way to do that. And you know what? I did bookmark the instructions. I should put that on the show notes that I post on Daily Co's, where you can find me as Justice Putnam. And do check out show notes. I post that about 10 minutes before showtime. And podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy emanate initially out of Spreaker, and then you can find it on Stitcher, TuneIn, and all great platforms that carry a lot of great podcasts, even bad ones they do sometimes. And I'm waiting for review and acceptance by iTunes. And they sometimes could take up to 3 weeks. How dare they? But apparently, according to them, at least on their, what they do, is they have a live person, an actual live person, listen to your podcast. So, well, I hope you enjoy it. I hope it wasn't just a job. Show music for West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is provided by Frances Livings, and you can find links to her work where you can check it out and purchase, please, on my show notes on Daily Co's. And so do that. And if you happen to be in Southern California, she plays all over the place. And sometimes even in the middle of the week, not just on the weekends. So do check her out. She's a great performer, and I like her. Yes. Okay, well, I suppose we ought to get in on these stories because time's a-flying. Now, when Standing Rock kerfuffle had occurred, there was a lot of news about police agencies from neighboring states, sometimes not even neighboring, from out there on the coast, both east and west, showed up in the middle of South Dakota, North Dakota, and, they got a chance to beat up people. And they did. And there was some speculation, or not speculation, but there was a security company, I think is how they were defined, which surprisingly looked like really a lot of mercenaries, if you've seen mercenaries and how they work. So this particular company has bullied protesters, and now they get to profit off of hurricanes. Because, when there's martial law and civil unrest, even when people are trying to help each other, you got to put some order to that. And what is better than just arbitrary orders from a bunch of guys with guns? Okay. The practice of governments and security firms conducting wide-scale exploitation of major disasters, natural and otherwise, is nothing new. Oh, this is by Maureen Kazanana out of Alternate. Last week, The Intercept, reported on Tiger Swan, a mercenary security firm that follows a similar disaster capitalist model and has attacked the North Dakota Access Pipeline, the No DAPL. That movement has they've been doing that since 2016 against the North Dakota Access Pipeline, at least. But that's not all. Tiger Swan has also been preying on relief needs in hurricane-hit areas like Houston and Puerto Rico since 2017, and it's already 2018 now. So far, the mercenary firm keeps its media presence at a minimum level, attracting little attention from the press. This makes sense considering the depth and scale of its massive military-style operations, including suppressing anti-pipeline activists by infiltrating activist groups with informants, surveilling the movement, and calling on law enforcement agencies to suppress activist organizing, because that's how you do it in America now. Well, I would say that you might want to talk to, the elders in the American Indian movement and have them explain to you how they felt about being infiltrated by informants, surveilled, and then law enforcement agencies called in to suppress activist organizing. Well, in spite of how the shadowy firm may sound, Tiger Swan has the approval of the United States government, and I think even more now with the guy that's sitting in the Oval Office. Tiger Swan contracts with the U.S. military and state departments to offer its services to Energy Transfer Partners, the company behind the Dakota Access Pipeline. Now, internal documents leaked from the firm in which Tiger Swan officials likened the No DAPL activists to jihadists and called the movement an ideologically driven insurgency with a strong religious component. Because, those damn Indians just want to be caretakers of the land. They think about what they're going to do 5 generations ahead. How their great, children, their offspring, 5 generations in the future, how it will affect them. And then they prey on it. but the wrong kind of prayers. Okay, let's be clear. Okay, this is a very familiar tactic that was done with Cambridge Analytica in terms of their propaganda arm, how they framed belief systems. Apparently, since 2014, Cambridge Analytica was trying out terms like "Make America Great Again," "draining the swamp." Those weird things, right? From 2014, specifically for Donald Trump. Well, Cambridge Analytica is not the only propaganda outfit, in the world. But it's always nice to find out that we have some that are not only making, some great propaganda, but they can actually have their own intelligence outfit and be agent provocateurs, because when you infiltrate a group, you're not there to collect information. You're there to set them up. And I got to tell you, they always do. Well, I suppose it's good to shine some light on these cockroaches, because it is the best antiseptic. Next up here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is by Evelyn Chang out of CNBC. Yes, Zuckerberg has sold more Facebook stock in the last 3 months than any insider at any other company. So, looks like in the 2 weeks before Facebook's latest struggles, Mark Zuckerberg sold 1.14 million shares as part of a regularly scheduled program. Well, you could interrupt that regularly scheduled program with, some breaking news. I suppose you could. Well, that was the most insider selling for any public company going back as far as 3 months, and that's according to Argus Research's Vickers Weekly Insider. In the Facebook case, Zuckerberg and another executive sold shares about $20 above where they were trading just yesterday. Analysts are not suggesting anything nefarious behind the regularly scheduled sales, unless you knew that the shit was going to hit the fan. I mean, come on, it's been building. Aren't these people supposed to be able to foresee the future through algorithmic coding? They knew. Okay. However, the sheer volume of the selling can amount to an overhang on the stock at a time when it could use all the support it can get. It's dropping precipitously, by the way. Facebook shares dropped 6.77% into correction territory Monday, the first trading day after a data scandal involving 50 million accounts added to concerns about user privacy. Facebook shares traded at 5.3% lower, near $163 per share on Tuesday afternoon. Except while I was preparing for the show today, and it's just a little too late to pick up and speak about, but I'm gonna mention it. Apparently, there's a Facebook insider whistleblower said it wasn't 50 million, hundreds of millions of users. Okay, we'll see how that gets ferreted out. Now, the insiders use Rule 10b-5-1 to sell on a regular basis. There are trading plans that they adopt and then sell shares in a methodical manner. And that's Ben Silverman, Director of Research at Insider Score, who continued, I don't see a connection between the insider selling and the news that has come out in the last few days. Still, investors and analysts who make buying and selling decisions based on executive stock moves give these plans some weight despite the benign status companies try to assign to them. They can cancel the plans anytime they want, Silverman said. Obviously, it's something we'll look for in the wake of what's going on and see if there's any decrease in insider selling volume in the near term. Yeah, always in the near term. Not now. Companies often compensate executives with stock, which they can sell at their discretion or according to a scheduled plan as determined by the SEC. Of course they do. Okay, Zuckerberg sales accounted for the most by far. He announced plans in September to sell 35 million to 75 million shares over the next 18 months to fund philanthropic efforts. Well, he does want to set up what he's calling the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which will focus on disease and education. Will the disease and education include the caustic erosion of our democracy and good neighbor policy through your algorithms, Mark? Will you be teaching about that? Will you try to eradicate that disease and then, educate people how they can avoid it? Already they're setting up ways so that if you're addicted to their product, they're creating a product to get you off the addiction. See how that works? It's already worked well in other industries, so I guess they'll just adopt it themselves. Okay, so, however, I think one of the reasons he was trying to sell his stock, a good thing he had a good schedule, because his wealth dropped to around $66 billion from $75 billion since the stock closed on Friday. So over the weekend, dropped, just about $9 billion. Ooh, darn. I guess he's not going to be able to buy all the property around his house. By some chance, Zuckerberg, I don't think it's going to happen. But, a small chance he falls by the wayside. It's always nice to know that, the vacuum will be filled. And it warms my hackles because I was so afraid Russia was going to be taking over our country. Well, now they have a direct competitor in Red China. And I got to tell you, competition is what makes America great. Cory Doctorow has this out of Boing Boing. And the American Legislative Exchange Council is a big business think tank that authors model legislation. Yeah, legislation in a box. They have a template for writing bills. They hash it out among themselves in the Exchange Council, come up with a plan in which to author these bills and who will then present them in our Congresses. And when I say Congresses, I mean state. It could be city councils, and certainly on the federal level. So Alec's Republican legislator friends often introduce bills that are word for word identical to the discussion drafts they circulate, making Alec the nation's most prolific and unapologetic legislative ghostwriter. Alibaba is Alec's latest member. The Chinese tech giant is an integral part of China's surveillance apparatus and a de facto arm of the Chinese government. Well, you need a government to be able to compete against the other government who's trying to take over our country so that they can try to take over our country instead. So white Russia, red China, I don't know, take your pick. How about a true blue American? And I don't mean, the you know what I mean. How about a true blue American? I like that. Okay, Alibaba did not respond to a request for comment, but at a conference, Bill Anaya, head of government affairs for Alibaba operations in the Americas, said that he heralded his company's entry into the lobby. We're so excited to be a part of ALEC. We are probably the world's largest e-commerce company that you've never heard about. We have business-to-business marketplace solutions. We have venture capitalist marketplace solutions. And we have over 500 million active buyers on our marketplaces. Wow, they know how to speak American, huh? Well, it ain't true blue American. Let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through the weather, of course, and then the stories that we curated for you today in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, first time's the charm. When playwright Corey Finley finished writing his first screenplay, he wasn't sure he had a movie on his hands. However, when he shopped it around, June Pictures picked it up and tapped Finley to direct his own work based on the strength of the script. That's a directing debut for his feature film debut. After the movie premiered at Sundance, Comcast Focus Features bought it, distributed it, and now we have Thoroughbred, starring Olivia Cooke and Anna Taylor-Joy as two rich high school young women, one who cannot feel any emotion while trying to be good, and the other who is being overwhelmed with her feelings and just needs a nudge to go bad. Together, they do not do good things for each other. Finley and his editor Louise Ford do good things for us as they execute a bold stylistic choice that is nothing less than a writer-director with a firm knowledge of how he wants his work to sound. This is a movie of negative space, where lines sit like islands in seas of stillness. With worse people, such a choice could be a recipe for a dull, plodding flick. However, Cooke, Taylor-Joy, Ford, Finley, and company are so good that instead this film feels tight and tense. Adding to the tension is the sound design. All the dialogue is so live and present, it's as if the characters are speaking next to you, creating an unnerving intimacy. Also, first-time feature film composer Eric Friedlander produces a shockingly unique score with cello and prepared piano that moans, clicks, and screeches as Finley and Ford weave it into the sinews of the action. This is also a movie of long takes, and you'd be tempted to say they betray Finley's theater background, but they're filmically strong, creating an abstract cinematic claustrophobia as if the characters are trapped in these moments of their lives, nothing to do but to let them happen, and we're trapped there with them. With a breakout performance by Cooke and a worthy final turn by taken before his time Anton Yelchin, Thoroughbreds has the makings of a cult classic. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. Federalist 10 is considered by many scholars to be James Madison's masterpiece. In this essay, Madison redefined the traditional concepts of democracy and a republic. He argued that by extending the sphere of Republican government to a national scope, the nation could avoid many of the problems of such a form of government at the local level. The greater diversity of large republics minimized the evils of faction and popular passion, making it more difficult for tyrannical majorities to combine. The representative government provided by the Constitution for such a republic, he argued, would also shield those in government from local passions. Larger constituencies and the indirect procedures for selecting a president, senators, and federal judges would encourage the choice of the most qualified. Madison described such provisions in the Constitution as a Republican remedy for the diseases most incident to Republican government. That's all for today's podcast. The show's theme song is Complacent by Cheryl B. Engelhardt. You can find Cheryl online at cbemusic.com. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day the United States Supreme Court upheld the Adamson Act. The act had initially been passed and signed into law the previous September to avoid a nationwide railway strike. It established the 8-hour workday and overtime pay for interstate railroad workers. The 4 railroad brotherhoods, the engineers, firemen, brakemen, and conductors, had been pushing for these terms since at least 1915. When the railroads refused to budge, the unions prepared to strike. It was the first federal law that sought to determine minimum wages and maximum hours for private industry. The railroads were furious with President Woodrow Wilson for demanding quick passage of the law. They filed the case Wilson versus New, which challenged the constitutionality of the act. The railroads refused to abide by the new law while they waited for their case to be heard, ultimately by the U.S. Supreme Court. The 4 railroad brotherhoods grew tired of waiting and organized for another strike. The court rejected the railroads' claim and upheld the act. President Wilson had hoped to ensure labor peace as the United States was on the cusp of entering World War I. Seen as a powerful victory for the unions, the railway employees pressed for similar demands. When the industry looked as though it was headed for yet another strike, President Wilson exercised the Army Appropriations Act and issued an executive order at the end of 1917 that placed the railroads under federal control. This nationalized the railroad industry into 3 divisions under the newly established United States Railroad Administration between the years of 1917 and 1920. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor special report recorded on Wednesday, March 21st, 2018. I'm Mark Belanger. Labor unions are warning that a huge trade deal being negotiated in secret will lead to more corporate control of the global economy, perilous jobs, and a disconnect between employers and their workers. The Trade and Services Agreement, TISA, is being negotiated by 21 governments plus the European Union. If implemented, it would cover 70% of the world's trade and services. To alert people about the dangers of TISA, the global union IUF commissioned a report on the agreement. IUF represents some 2.5 million workers around the world who are employed in food industries, agriculture, hotels, and other sectors. I talked to Jane Kelsey about the report she wrote for the IUF. Dr. Kelsey is a professor of law at the University of Auckland in New Zealand. In her report, she discusses the rise of digital platforms such as Amazon and Facebook and how TISA would give them even more influence on global trade.
People often refer now to the fourth industrial revolution. You know, we had the old development of the Fordist factory system in the past. Now we have another revolution that is changing the way that capitalism operates, and it's conducted through the digital domain. If we think about the way that people are even working in a basic factory or a distribution center, increasingly we see artificial intelligence, we see computer systems operating, how work is done, how workers are monitored. But we see also that labour replacement is happening, and when labour is replaced, new jobs that might come in are actually the skilled tech jobs. They're not the jobs of people who are displaced from the factory floor. But at the other end of if we just talk about the food supply chain, if we look at the impact of entities like Uber and Uber Eats, or we look at Airbnb and the operations of the accommodation sector and so on, we see that we have digital platforms where the workers are supposedly self-employed. They're not employed any longer by the actual operator of the business, and therefore the Ubers or the Airbnbs take no responsibility for the compliance with the labor laws, providing for health and safety, providing for pensions, providing for compliance with minimum wages and so on. The individual workers are thrown back onto themselves as supposedly self-employed, even though they don't control the nature of the workplace at all. And so we have fundamental shifts occurring under this so-called fourth industrial revolution in the way that work is organized, in the way that employment relationships occur, and in the very nature of work. And that affects how workers and unions can bargain. If you are operating with a notional employer from offshore, how do you bargain with them? Who is the employer? And so that's why the digitization is so important. Team TISA, the biggest group of corporations pushing for these rules to be unrestricted in the future, to have seamless global operations, are actually the big tech companies. Capitalism has always been a battle over power, especially a battle between capital and labor. And as we've seen over the neoliberal period of the last 30 to 40 years, the imbalances there have intensified. What TISA seeks to do is to stretch that imbalance even further.
An extended version of my interview with Dr. Kelsey is available on the Radio Labor website at www.radiolabor.net. And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. Venezuela's Petro cryptocurrency had its ICO on Tuesday, but it was overshadowed by newly imposed U.S. sanctions. If you're confused already, let's break that sentence down. Venezuela is broke.
The Venezuelan government is desperate for cash right now.
That's Jeff Ramsey, the Assistant Director for Venezuela at the Washington Office on Latin America.
U.S. financial sanctions have made it extremely difficult for the government to issue new debts without going through the legitimate National Assembly, the legislature, which is controlled by the opposition.
To help fundraise, Venezuela announced the creation of a cryptocurrency called the Petro. It's a digital currency pegged to the value of a barrel of Venezuelan oil. That's a bit different from other cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, the value of which rises and falls based on interest from investors. The government of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says there's tremendous interest in the Petro with billions of dollars in pre-orders, but that's hard to evaluate.
The government has every incentive to inflate these figures, and we, the public, have very little reason to believe them.
Which brings us to an executive order from President Trump on Monday banning Americans from buying the Petro coin. While the U.S. sanctions will deny revenue to Maduro's government and subject Venezuelan financial dealings to greater regulatory scrutiny, Ramsey says they have the unintended effect of playing into Maduro's political argument that the U.S. is out to get Venezuela.
There's very little reasons to expect the Petro to take off and reverse Venezuela's economic woes, with or without the sanctions. I think applying sanctions to the Petro now only fuels the rhetorical benefits that Maduro is taking from this us versus them framing of the crisis.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is our daily special. And at the chef's table, we always like to begin with weather from around the world. And we start off along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it's currently 40 degrees. And we are looking at a high of 62. Ooh. And we will have rain most of the day. We had a spot of rain just a moment ago, and now it's not raining, but the rain cells, the water in the sky, is showing up on the radar. So it looks like we're going to have quite a bit of rain. So. It will be increasing the showers by tomorrow. So we will have quite a bit of rain overnight and quite a bit of rain tomorrow and through the weekend. So lows will be upper 30s, low 40s. Right now, winds are negligible, about 2 miles per hour out of the east-southeast. But later on, they're going to shift to from out of the north-northwest to 5 to 10 miles per hour. And by tomorrow, they're going to be out of the west-southwest at 10 to 20 miles per hour. So I can imagine the gusts then. And let's see. Pressure is falling at 29.7 inches. Visibility is about 4 miles. And humidity is 93%, which you would expect. Still no data on air quality. Apparently, the person's personal weather station is not collecting that data. What's up? Okay. Oh, a special weather statement. I'm sorry. I have to see the special weather statement. It just came up. Ooh, heavy mountain snow and some low land snow possible late this week. All right. An unusual cold and wet system for late March is expected. In like a lion, out like a lamb. And it looks like the in like a lion's coming pretty late in the month, if you ask me. A strong cold front will move through late Thursday with snow levels lowering, to below 2,000 feet. As low as 1,000 feet by Friday morning. At the same time, an atmospheric river will take aim at the coast near the California-Oregon border and bring a lot of moisture to the area. The combination of cold air and heavy precipitation will lead to the potential for heavy snow accumulations. I guess people are going to just have to go skiing. All right. So let's see here. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchase. And these people planted these personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people live around the world. London is 51 degrees and sunny. Paris is 47 and partly cloudy. Rome is 55 and mostly cloudy. Kiev is 30 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 56 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 60 and clear. Tokyo is 40 degrees with rain. Sydney, Australia is 66 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy, and they're expecting a river of rain too. And New York, New York is 31 degrees, and it's freaking snowing. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people live around the world. Starting off here at the chef's table part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, is an article by Addie Baird out of Think Progress. Now, we reported on the speculation that the GOP in Pennsylvania would want to impeach or remove or in some way impede the, I wish they would impede the state Supreme Court there. And now it looks like it's coming to fruition, at least in terms of introducing legislation to remove them. Republican lawmaker by the name of Representative Chris Douche. Could be Dush, but I think it's Douche. And what you are named for what you are. All right. or who you think your parents, or who your parents think you will become, or maybe who they want you to become. I think in this case, Providence somehow interceded. Chris Douche has introduced resolutions to impeach Justices Kevin Doherty, Christine Donahue, Deborah McCloskey Todd, and David Wecht, accusing them of misbehavior in office because they didn't toe, the one-party line. All right. And a fifth resolution to impeach Justice Max Baer is pending as well. Wow, Max Baer's come back to fight a few rounds. Who knew? Douche argues that the justices overstepped their bounds when they determined that Pennsylvania's congressional map, which was originally drawn in 2011, violated the state's constitution. The map was one of the most egregious examples of gerrymandering, a strategy of drawing districts in outlandish ways in an effort to elect more members of one party. And this is in the country's history, as Mark Steer, the director of Pennsylvania's Budget and Policy Center, put it in an interview with Think Progress just last week. In the past, Republicans have consistently won 13 out of 18 House seats despite getting only less than 50% of statewide votes. After the court's ruling, the map was redrawn by a nonpartisan expert, creating 4 swing districts, 8 that favor Republicans and 6 that favor Democrats, and that's just not enough for the GOP. They want it all. Oh, you can have one. We'll pack you all in one district. Have fun. Jesus. Republican legislators in the state have fought to block the new map since January, arguing that these legislators should have been the one to redraw the map. Well, they're the ones that drew the bad map to begin with. They had an opportunity to redraw it a number of times. And the court said, you violated the court order, and now we have to draw it, you idiots. We gave you every opportunity. We don't want to do it. We got better things to do. Well, the matter was settled for good on Monday when the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear a request from GOP legislators in the state who wanted the high court to block the new map. Sorry. Now, Douche wants the state Supreme Court justices who made the original ruling gone. They lost in the U.S. Supreme Court. Now they want to impeach the state Supreme Court justices. He said that the 5 justices who signed this order that blatantly and clearly contradicts the plain language of the Pennsylvania Constitution engaged in misbehavior in office. Douche wrote, I am sorry. I'm thinking a little bit more about the misbehavior in office of the GOP, and this has been going on since at least Reagan, and some might even argue Nixon. And I'm not talking about when he was president. Yeah, VP Dick. In an interview with The Hill, Douche said this is basically 7th grade civics class all over again. Who even takes civics in 7th and 8th grade anymore? We used to. The separation of powers and the authority of the legislator, the courts basically are there to interpret when there's conflict in the law and they don't have any sovereignty. Well, I hate to tell you, they are the ones who decide the law, and you just didn't follow the law, fellow. Well, Pennsylvania State House has the power to impeach justices, and Republicans have a majority in the House, holding 120 of 203 seats. Removing a justice would also require 2/3 of the state Senate to vote in favor, and Republicans hold 34, almost exactly 2/3 of 50 state Senate seats.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Joshua Eaton penned this last offering here at the Chef's Table in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, of course, Gina Haspel, we know, is Trump's nominee for CIA director, and she was a strong advocate for destroying those torture tapes. And the CIA was still defending as late as last year a 2005 decision by Haspel and her former boss, Jose Rodriguez, to destroy videos of CIA torture at a black site Haspel oversaw, according to previously unpublished documents obtained by Think Progress. Remarkably, the CIA argued that it did not need to preserve videotapes of its enhanced interrogations, which were torture sessions with suspects that involved methods like wall slams, confinement boxes, and waterboarding, because they were like formal government meetings and therefore less stringent guidelines applied when it came to preserving records of such a meeting. We're not torturing you because we have a personal animosity against you. It's just business. And obviously, when we have these meetings in business, we normally body slam people against a wall, play extremely loud music, for 24 hours, 7 days a week. Put you out in the cold, put you in ice water. That happens normally in business meetings, at least in the U.S. Jeez. Have you ever gone to one of those team building meetings? It's like being put in ice water. At least for me it was. Jeez. On the other hand, the team building activities, like when you get to go on a whitewater rafting trip with your fellow workers, you really get to see who, you might want to go to battle with. And who you want to keep away from the campfire, too. Have you ever... Well, maybe not. Well, with Haspel up for the top job at the CIA, human rights advocates worry about the tone she'll set at an agency that has repeatedly resisted accountability of its role in torture after 9/11. Let's see. The document shows the back and forth from March 2016 to February 2017, email back and forth between the CIA and National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA. That's the agency in charge of government records and their preservation, about the tape destruction incident. So, NARA can refer so-called unauthorized disposition cases to the Justice Department for prosecution, and it had done so in this case, but Justice declined to prosecute the CIA tape destruction in 2012. That left NARA's hands largely tied, but the agency followed up with the CIA to press them on better preserving records in the future. If we don't address the past, it won't be addressed in the future. I know there was this need to not, dredge up all these illegalities and inequities in the past, but you know what? If you don't, they get more toxic over time, and when they rear their ugly head once again, they're not just a little, sort of like friendly little monster. They are now a global eating monster. Okay, well, I guess we need to find out more about what's going on with these black sites and maybe shut them down. That would be a nice thing, because the CIA is supposed to be there for our protection, not for retribution against some arbitrary enemy. Let's not do that anymore. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. Only here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, because we'll be back tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Yes. So do join us tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.